The message arrived at 11:42 on a Thursday night, while Daniel Mercer was rinsing coffee cups in the kitchen of the quiet suburban home he had paid for over 23 years. Yesterday was beautiful. Thank you to everyone who came and supported our special day. Underneath the sentence was a wedding photo. His daughter, Lily, stood smiling in a white dress beside a man Daniel had only met twice. Around them stood friends, cousins, coworkers, even neighbors Daniel recognized instantly. But Daniel wasn't there. His hands froze under the running water as the phone trembled in his grip. At first, his tired mind tried to make sense of it logically. Maybe it was an engagement party, maybe a rehearsal dinner, maybe some kind of joke. Then he saw the comments. "Best wedding ever. You look stunning. So happy I could witness this." Daniel's stomach folded inward. Wedding. Past tense. Yesterday. His daughter had gotten married the day before, and he had found out from social media like a stranger scrolling through somebody else's life. The faucet kept running long after the cup slipped from his hand and cracked in the sink. For nearly an hour, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the screen. He clicked every photo slowly, like his brain was refusing to believe any of them were real. Lily laughing during the vows. Lily dancing with her new husband, Trevor. Lily hugging her mother, Elise. There was even a father-daughter dance. But the man holding Lily in the photos was Daniel. It was Elise's new husband, Richard. Daniel zoomed into the picture until it blurred. Richard wore a gray tuxedo and smiled proudly while Lily rested her head on his shoulder. The caption read, "The man who always showed up for me." Daniel leaned back in his chair, as if somebody had punched him directly in the chest. The house felt suddenly colder. 3 years earlier, Daniel and Elise had finalized a divorce neither of them truly talked about honestly. To outsiders, they described it as growing apart. But the truth sat much uglier beneath the surface. Daniel had spent most of his marriage working. Overtime shifts, weekend contracts, double hours, promotions. Everything he did, he convinced himself, was for the family. Lily's dance lessons, private school tuition, the college savings account, the vacations Elise wanted. Every sacrifice had seemed necessary at the time. But somewhere along the way, his family stopped seeing sacrifices. They only saw absence. By the time Daniel noticed the emotional distance forming, Elise had already emotionally checked out of the marriage. A year later, she met Richard at a charity event. Richard had time. Richard attended brunches. Richard remembered birthdays. Richard posted smiling family pictures online. And slowly, without Daniel fully realizing it, Richard became part of moments Daniel assumed he still belonged to. Even after the divorce, Daniel believed Lily still loved him. She called occasionally. She visited every few weeks. Their conversations were shorter than before, but Daniel blamed adulthood. People grow busy, he told himself. Kids drift a little. That's life. But this was something else entirely. His daughter had planned an entire wedding without telling him. Not an argument. Not a misunderstanding. A deliberate choice. At 12:18 a.m., Daniel finally typed a message. "Lily, I just saw the photos. I don't understand." He erased it. Typed again. "Why wasn't I invited?" Deleted that too. Every version sounded pathetic. Eventually, he set the phone face down and sat in silence while the refrigerator hummed softly across the room. At 7:03 the next morning, his phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Dad, I was going to call you." Daniel stared at the message for a long time before replying. "When?" 3 dots appeared instantly. Disappeared. Returned. Finally. "I knew you'd be upset." Upset. The word nearly made him laugh. He stood from the table and paced the kitchen. "Upset because my daughter got married without telling me." Another pause. "Trevor and I wanted something small and peaceful." Daniel's jaw tightened. There were over 80 people there. No answer came for several minutes. Then, "We didn't want drama." Daniel read the sentence 5 times. Drama. His mind replayed every birthday he worked overtime to pay for. Every soccer game he rushed across town to attend after 12-hour shifts. Every late-night emergency room visit when Lily was little and terrified of needles. Drama. What exactly did you think I would do? He typed. This time, her answer came quickly. Mom said you'd probably make it about yourself. Daniel stopped moving. The words sat on the screen like ice water poured directly into his chest. Not because they hurt. Because they sounded believable coming from Elise. Even after all these years. Especially after all these years. Daniel closed the conversation without responding. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows while the neighborhood slowly woke up. Cars pulled from driveways. Sprinklers clicked across manicured lawns. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked happily. Normal life continued. But inside Daniel's chest, something had shifted permanently. By noon, 3 different relatives had texted him awkward versions of sympathy. Thought you chose not to come. Didn't realize you weren't invited. Sorry, man, weird situation. Weird situation. Nobody wanted to say what it actually was. Humiliation. Daniel finally called his younger sister, Amanda, because she was one of the few people who still spoke to him honestly. She answered on the second ring. You okay? No, Daniel admitted immediately. Amanda sighed softly. I figured. You went. The silence answered first. Then quietly, yeah. Daniel closed his eyes. Did you know I wasn't invited? I thought Lily talked to you. She didn't. Amanda cursed under her breath. Danny. What happened? Amanda hesitated carefully, like someone walking through broken glass. Honestly, Elise controlled most of it. That's not an answer. She kept saying it would be uncomfortable if you came. For who? For Lily mostly. Daniel laughed bitterly. My own daughter was uncomfortable with me at her wedding. It's complicated. No, it's actually very simple. Amanda's voice softened. You and Lily haven't been close in years. That doesn't mean I stopped being her father. No, Amanda agreed quietly. It doesn't. Daniel sat back down at the kitchen table. His coffee from earlier had gone cold, untouched. I saw Richard did the father-daughter dance. Amanda inhaled sharply, but didn't deny it. That was Lily's idea, she said carefully. But she allowed it. Again, silence. That hurt more than any explanation could. After the call ended, Daniel walked upstairs to the spare bedroom closet, where he kept old boxes he rarely opened anymore. Inside one faded plastic container sat years of Lily's childhood memories. Handmade Father's Day cards. Crayon drawings. A tiny pair of ballet shoes. Photos from camping trips. There was one picture Daniel always loved most. Lily was 8 years old, sitting on his shoulders during a 4th of July parade. She held cotton candy in one hand while laughing directly at the camera. On the back, she had written in crooked pencil, "My dad is my hero." Daniel sat on the floor staring at the words until his vision blurred. He didn't cry immediately. The tears came slowly, quietly, almost reluctantly. Because the hardest part wasn't missing the wedding. The hardest part was realizing his daughter had emotionally buried him long before the ceremony ever happened. And somehow he hadn't noticed. 3 days passed before Lily finally called. Daniel almost didn't answer. But he did. Hi, she said carefully. The hesitation in her voice sounded unfamiliar, formal, guarded. Hi. I didn't want you finding out online. But that's what happened. I know. Daniel waited. Lily exhaled shakily. I just didn't know how to handle it. Handle what? You and Mom. There is no me and your mother anymore. You say that, but every holiday turns tense. Daniel frowned, because your mother makes everything tense. That's exactly what I mean. He almost interrupted, but stopped himself. Lily continued quietly, Dad, every event becomes emotionally exhausting. Mom gets anxious. Richard gets defensive. You shut down, everybody walks on eggshells. Daniel stared at the wall across from him. I stayed quiet for years. You stayed angry for years. The sentence hit harder than he expected, because part of him knew there was truth in it. After the divorce, Daniel had withdrawn emotionally from almost everyone. He never yelled, never caused scenes, but his silence carried weight. At family gatherings, he became distant, cold, detached. Lily noticed. Of course she noticed. Still, none of that explained this level of betrayal. So your solution, Daniel said slowly, was pretending I didn't exist. That's not fair. No, then explain it fairly. Lily's voice cracked slightly for the first time. I was tired of feeling guilty all the time. Daniel frowned. Guilty for what? For loving Mom's new life. The room went completely still. Lily kept speaking before he could answer. You always looked disappointed any time Richard was around. Any time I mentioned him. Any time I talked about vacations or dinners or holidays with Mom's side. Because he replaced me. No, Dad, Lily said softly. You left an empty space first. Daniel felt those words land deep. Painfully deep. You think I abandoned you. I think you worked all the time and expected money to replace presents. Daniel opened his mouth, then stopped. Because suddenly, memories returned with brutal clarity. Missing dance recitals due to meetings. Answering work calls during family dinners. Promising next weekend, over and over again. At the time, he genuinely believed he was being responsible. But children don't measure love through mortgage payments. They measure it through attention. I did everything for this family, he said quietly. I know you believe that. The sentence wasn't cruel. That somehow made it worse. Daniel rubbed his forehead slowly. So Richard became the father who had time. Lily stayed silent long enough to confirm it without words. He listened, she admitted finally. He showed up consistently. Daniel swallowed hard. You could have still invited me. I was afraid. Of me. Of hurting everyone. Daniel laughed softly, exhausted. You accomplished that anyway. Lily started crying then. Small, restrained tears she was trying hard to hide. I never wanted to lose you. Daniel looked down at the old photo, still sitting beside him on the couch. You already did. The silence after that sentence stretched painfully between them. Finally, Lily whispered, I don't know how to fix this. Neither did he. That was the terrifying part. Because some wounds weren't caused by one moment. They formed slowly over years. Tiny disappointments. Missed opportunities. Unspoken resentment. Emotional distance disguised as survival. By the time people noticed the damage, the relationship was already collapsing underneath them. That night Daniel couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., he sat alone on the back porch watching rainwater drip from the gutters, while old memories replayed endlessly in his mind. Lily learning to ride a bike. Lily asleep against his chest during thunderstorms. Lily waiting near the front window when he came home late from work. He remembered all the times she asked him to stay longer. All the times he promised someday things would slow down. Someday never came. And now another man had walked his daughter down the aisle. Not because Richard stole the role. Because over time, Daniel unknowingly surrendered pieces of it himself. The realization was unbearable. But even then, even with all the guilt swirling inside him, another truth remained impossible to ignore. Nothing justified what Lily did. Nothing. A week later, Daniel went grocery shopping early Sunday morning hoping to avoid people. Instead, fate cornered him near the produce section. Richard. Tall, calm, perfectly dressed as always. He pushed a cart casually while examining avocados like a man untouched by conflict. When he spotted Daniel, surprise flashed briefly across his face. Then caution. Daniel. Daniel's entire body stiffened. Richard approached slowly. I was meaning to call. Daniel almost laughed. To say what exactly? Thanks for raising my daughter until you could take over. Richard sighed heavily. This isn't helpful. No, what wasn't helpful was watching you dance with my daughter at her wedding. Several nearby shoppers glanced over awkwardly before quickly pretending not to listen. Richard lowered his voice. Lily made that choice. You encouraged it. I supported her. Daniel stepped closer. You should have stopped it. Richard's expression tightened for the first time. You think I wanted this situation? Lily was terrified the wedding would turn into emotional warfare. I would never ruin her wedding. Richard looked at him steadily. You sure about that? Daniel froze. Not because the accusation was true, but because even he wasn't entirely certain how he would have reacted seeing Richard in that role all night. That hesitation alone infuriated him further. Richard continued carefully, Lily loves you, but she spent years feeling caught between loyalty and peace. Daniel shook his head bitterly, and you became the peaceful option. No, Richard said quietly, I became the available option. The words sliced deep because they echoed Lily's own. Daniel stepped back slowly. For the first time since seeing those wedding photos, his anger began colliding with something more dangerous. Self-awareness. And that hurt far worse than rage. Daniel avoided everyone for nearly 2 weeks after the grocery store encounter. Work became his refuge again. Not because he loved it anymore, but because spreadsheets, meetings, and deadlines demanded focus. Numbers didn't betray you emotionally. Contracts didn't replace you at weddings. People did. Every evening, he returned to the same quiet house where silence waited like an unwelcome roommate. He stopped checking social media entirely after accidentally seeing another wedding clip posted by one of Lily's friends. 37 seconds. That was all it took to ruin his entire night. Lily laughing during speeches. Trevor kissing her forehead. Richard raising a champagne glass while guests applauded. Daniel had watched the clip 3 times before finally throwing his phone onto the couch in disgust. He hated how obsessed he'd become with moments he wasn't invited to. But grief did strange things to people. Especially the kind of grief nobody prepared you for. Because his daughter wasn't dead. She had simply decided life felt easier without him present. That realization replayed endlessly in his head. One Thursday evening, Amanda showed up unexpectedly carrying Chinese takeout and enough blunt honesty to bulldoze through Daniel's emotional walls. You look terrible, she announced while stepping inside. Nice to see you too. I'm serious, when's the last time you slept properly? Daniel shrugged, busy week. Liar. She set food containers onto the kitchen counter before studying him carefully. You're disappearing again. I'm fine. You always say that right before emotionally isolating for 6 months. Daniel sighed heavily and grabbed 2 plates. Amanda leaned against the counter. Have you talked to Lily since the call? No. Why? She made her choice. Amanda crossed her arms immediately. Don't do that. Do what? Turn heartbreak into pride. Daniel frowned. I'm not. Yes, you are. He scooped rice mechanically onto the plates. She excluded me from the biggest day of her life. And now you're punishing both of you by pretending the relationship is already dead. Daniel placed the spoon down harder than intended. She said Richard showed up more than I did. Amanda's expression softened slightly. Well, he did. Daniel looked away instantly. Amanda continued carefully, that doesn't erase what you sacrificed, but Lily's feelings aren't fake just because they hurt. I know that. Do you? Daniel sat at the table quietly while Amanda joined him. For several minutes, they ate in silence before Amanda finally spoke again. You know what your real problem is. Daniel gave a humorless smile, only one. You still think love is proven through endurance. He looked up. You spent your whole life believing suffering for people automatically made them feel loved, working nonstop, carrying pressure silently, taking responsibility for everything financially. I was trying to provide. I know, but emotionally, you disappeared a long time before the divorce. Daniel stared at his untouched food. Amanda's voice softened further. Lily didn't stop loving you overnight, she stopped expecting you. That sentence stayed with him long after Amanda left. Stopped expecting you. Not because she hated him. Because disappointment eventually teaches people emotional self-protection. Daniel sat awake until nearly dawn thinking about moments he once dismissed as insignificant. The dance recital he missed because a client threatened to pull funding. The camping trip he canceled twice. The parent-teacher conferences Elise attended alone. At the time, every decision seemed logical. Necessary. Temporary. But children remember patterns, not intentions. And maybe Lily spent years quietly adjusting to life, without him emotionally available. That possibility hollowed him out. The next Sunday, Daniel received another surprise. Trevor called him. Daniel nearly ignored it. Instead, he answered cautiously, "Hello." "Hey Daniel, it's Trevor." Daniel leaned back slowly in his chair. "What do you need?" Trevor hesitated. "Honestly, I wanted to talk." "About?" "Lily." Daniel rubbed his jaw. "That usually ends well." "I know you're angry." "That's an understatement." Trevor exhaled carefully. "She's falling apart." Daniel's chest tightened despite himself. "What do you mean?" "She's pretending she's fine, but she's not sleeping. She cries almost every night." Daniel looked down at the floor silently. Trevor continued, "I don't think she expected this much damage. She should have thought about that before excluding me from her wedding." "She did think about it," Trevor said quietly, "for months." Daniel frowned. "What?" Trevor hesitated again, clearly choosing words carefully. "She almost invited you 3 separate times." Daniel froze. "What are you talking about?" "She kept changing her mind. One day she'd say she couldn't imagine getting married without you there. The next day she'd panic about tension between everyone." Daniel's anger shifted uneasily. Trevor continued softly, "Your divorce affected her more than either of you realized." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "We tried to protect her." "I know," Trevor replied, "but kids still absorb everything." Daniel remembered those final years of marriage now, with painful clarity. The cold dinners. The passive-aggressive silence. Arguments whispered behind closed doors that probably weren't quiet enough. Lily had been 22 during the divorce, old enough to understand everything, young enough to still be wounded by it. Trevor's voice interrupted his thoughts. "She spent years feeling responsible for everyone's emotions. That's not fair to put on her." "No," Trevor agreed, "it is." Daniel leaned forward slowly. "So why didn't she call me before the wedding?" Trevor answered honestly. "Because she thought you'd make her choose." Daniel immediately wanted to deny it. But then he remembered every uncomfortable family dinner after the divorce. Every withdrawn expression when Richard entered the room. Every short answer. Every cold silence. Maybe Lily had interpreted his pain as emotional pressure. And maybe, sometimes it was. Trevor lowered his voice. "She loves you, Daniel." Daniel laughed bitterly. "That's hard to believe right now." "She does, but loving someone and feeling emotionally safe with them aren't always the same thing." That sentence hit disturbingly hard. After the call ended, Daniel sat motionless for almost an hour. Then, for the first time in years, he opened an old email folder labeled Family. Inside were thousands of forgotten pieces of his life. Photos, vacation plans, school newsletters, random memories. He clicked through them slowly until one particular email stopped him cold. From Lily Mercer. Age 15. Subject, you coming tonight. Dad, please try, even if you're late. I saved you a seat. Attached was a recital flyer. Daniel stared at the timestamp. He never went. A work emergency had happened. At least that's what he told himself back then. But sitting there now, 11 years later, Daniel couldn't even remember what the emergency was. He remembered the missed recital, though. Clearly. Painfully. Another email. Age 16. Can we still do breakfast Saturday? You promised. No response from him underneath. Another. Dad, you forgot again, lol. Another. It's okay, maybe next week. Daniel pressed both palms against his eyes. The guilt arrived in waves now. Not because he was a bad father, but because he genuinely believed effort and love automatically translated emotionally. They didn't. Presence mattered differently. Consistency mattered differently. And by the time he realized it, someone else had become the dependable figure in Lily's adult life. That evening, Daniel did something he hadn't done in months. He drove. No destination initially. Just movement. The city lights blurred softly through the windshield, while old songs played quietly on the radio. Eventually, he found himself parked outside Lily's childhood dance studio. The building looked smaller now. Closed. Dark. Daniel remembered sitting in the parking lot during practices answering work emails, while promising himself he'd spend more quality time with her later. Later became years. Then regret. Around 9 p.m., his phone buzzed. Lily. Daniel stared at the screen while his heartbeat quickened unexpectedly. Finally, he answered. Hi. Her voice sounded fragile immediately. Hi. A long silence followed. Then Lily spoke carefully. Trevor told me he called you. He did. I didn't ask him to. I know. Another pause. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daniel closed his eyes. Those 2 words should have satisfied him. For days he'd imagined hearing them. But now that they arrived, the hurt remained stubbornly intact. Why now? He asked quietly. Because I hate this. So do I. Lily sniffled softly. I never wanted you out of my life. Then why did it feel so easy to remove me from your wedding? The question cracked through both of them painfully. Lily cried quietly before answering. It wasn't easy. Daniel waited. I kept thinking maybe things would magically feel normal if I simplified everything, she admitted. No tension, no uncomfortable moments, no worrying about Mom or Richard or you. And instead I hurt the person who mattered most. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly. Part of him wanted to hold on to anger, because anger felt safer than vulnerability. But another part remembered the little girl who once waited near windows for him to come home. You replaced me with Richard, he said softly. No. He walked you down the aisle. Lily inhaled shakily. That wasn't replacing you. What would you call it? She answered honestly. Survival. Daniel frowned. I knew if I asked both you and Richard to participate, the entire day would feel emotionally tense. So you chose him. I chose peace, she whispered. The sentence hurt because Daniel understood it now. Not fully. Not comfortably. But enough. Lily continued through tears. Richard never tried to become my father. Daniel stayed quiet. He actually defended you a lot more than you know. That surprised him. What? He told Mom several times she should encourage me to invite you. Daniel blinked slowly. But she said you'd resent everything and probably leave early or shut down emotionally. Daniel exhaled heavily. The frustrating part was, Elise wasn't entirely wrong. Not because he wanted revenge, but because seeing another man in his role would have devastated him in real time. Lily's voice softened. You were always hardest on yourself, Dad. Daniel frowned slightly. What does that mean? You never forgave yourself for the divorce, or for missing things when I was younger. And after a while, it felt like you stopped trying because you already believed you failed. Daniel looked out through the windshield at the empty parking lot. Maybe she was right. After the divorce, shame quietly consumed him. Instead of fighting harder emotionally, he withdrew further. Distance became easier than risking rejection. And ironically, that distance created exactly what he feared most. Losing her. I don't know how to fix us, Lily admitted. Daniel swallowed slowly. Neither do I. But I want to try. The words settled carefully between them. Not dramatic. Not magical. Just honest. And honesty felt unfamiliar after years of emotional avoidance. Daniel drove home afterward with a strange heaviness in his chest. Not relief. Not forgiveness. Something more complicated. Grief mixed with understanding. Pain mixed with accountability. Because the betrayal was real. But so was the damage underneath it. For the first time since the wedding, Daniel stopped viewing himself purely as the victim. That realization was brutal, necessary, and deeply humbling. 3 days later, another unexpected moment arrived. Daniel opened his mailbox after work and found a small cream-colored envelope with Lily's handwriting on the front. Inside was a photograph. Not from the wedding. From 20 years earlier. Lily sat on Daniel's shoulders at a county fair, holding a giant stuffed bear, while both of them laughed uncontrollably. On the back she had written, "You were never replaced. I just didn't know how to stop hurting everybody at once." Daniel stared at the sentence for a long time. Then finally, for the first time since discovering the wedding, he cried without anger attached to it. Just sadness. Pure, exhausted sadness. Because love alone hadn't failed their family. Avoidance had. And now every single one of them would have to decide whether the relationship was still worth rebuilding from the wreckage left behind. The first family dinner happened almost a month after the wedding. Nobody called it that out loud. Lily simply texted, "Would you come over Sunday? Just dinner, nothing complicated." Daniel stared at the message for 10 full minutes before replying. "What time?" The answer came immediately. 5:30. Simple. Careful. Like both of them were approaching a wounded animal that might still bite if startled. Sunday arrived colder than expected.